The Greater Evil Paradox, a Code Geass analysis by Protagonist Rayen. As somebody that's viewed Code Geass for a number of years, as somebody who bases a lot of current philosophies off of philosophies and moral quandaries and quagmires, so to speak. Thanks, Mao. Presented by this series. I thought this would be very interesting to look at. It's always good to see more Code Geass content.
You know, one of the most interesting things I've watched in Code Geass is actually this dialogue between him and this Cornelius simp. So here's how it goes.
This is very specifically, if you are looking for this is Code Geass R2. I believe it's somewhere episode 3 to 5. I can't remember. This is when this is after Zero's return, and he is trying to take back the Black Knight prisoners of war back from the Britannian Empire, as Britannia did take them into custody after the Black Rebellion, the first Black Rebellion. And this is the question that Lelouch poses. I believe, because I've watched the dub, Danny Young Bosch does an absolutely amazing job as Lelouch's VA in the English. And so effectively what this question boils down to is I have a question for you, Lord Guilford. If you are presented with an evil that cannot be overcome by just means, do you remain just in the knowledge that you will fail against this evil, or do you stay in your hands? Do you stay in your hands with evil to overcome this evil? As I believe how that back and forth goes, which C2 at this point does say that it is a paradox. In either case, evil does remain. Which Guilford, being a Cornelia's knight, justice, I will choose justice. He will stick to his guns, quote unquote, proverbially. He will remain with his beliefs and will charge ahead forward, remaining just. Whereas Lelouch, he will commit a greater evil to overcome this evil. He is willing to, and this actually showcases his philosophy down the line. This showcases what we see at the ending of R2. Your Highness. Things actually did blow up, yeah.
The question that Lelouch is trying to ask is that would you commit a greater evil in order to suppress or eliminate the first, yet arguably lesser evil? And it's interesting how the show uses Lelouch and Suzaku to portray these two different ideologies, and how they go about in the show basically covers their stance on what they think of Lelouch's problem.
So it has been, I can't remember which video brought this to my attention. So Suzaku is the means will justify the end. Suzaku and Lelouch are foils of each other narratively. Suzaku being the means will justify the end. Suzaku, obviously, I would argue abhors the concept of war. He wants people to get along, right? I think we can at the very least acknowledge this. And so Suzaku, assassinating Genbu Kururugi, his father, was, a means to the end of causing a lesser loss of life to Japan as a nation and the Japanese people, albeit at the cost of them being, dehumanized, becoming 11s, becoming subservient to Britannia. And how Suzaku sees working up, growing through society is to, and we see this during R2, I believe when he was fighting Colin on the Damocles, is he's talking about, there are people that are forced to join the system, and how we can bring about greater change is to use the system and promote within the system to create change. Whereas Lelouch is the ends will justify the means. He will become the greater evil to destroy the lesser evil. He is willing to become the demon of the world, to conquer the world and hold it hostage, and in the process, to quash Britannia and what they have stood for. And, he views, the systems as broken. So thus why he effectively resorts to funny T word, you know, the in TTT, that game mode, the last word, which I can't technically say on YouTube because, you know, YouTube TOS, and I'm trying very hard to be nice. he does resort to that T word. He does resort to despicable acts. He does resort to certain actions like this.
And I wanted to draw you guys' attention to these two branches of ethical
This
philosophy.
show was sponsored by
don't
us,
worry,
Pizza Hut.
I'm not actually going to bore you to sleep by telling you about this and that philosopher, but listen up for a sec in this scenario. I think it's pretty interesting. And here's the basic scenario. So imagine you're standing near a set of train tracks and you see a trolley coming down the tracks. Ahead, there are 5 people tied up and unable to move on one track, and on another track, there's a single person also tied up. You're standing next to a lever that can switch the trolley from one track to the other. Now you're faced with the decision.
You are faced with the inevitable in this example. You are faced with the inevitability that the train will continue to move forward. This train cannot be stopped. You have to choose which rail this train will go to. And at that point, it becomes a cost-benefit analysis of, is in this situation, it's just, words. I can't speak today. In this situation, is 1 life equal to 5 lives? And that is what it's trying to pose.
You can either do nothing. So in this scenario, if you don't pull the lever, the trolley will continue on its current path and hit the group of 5 people. However, if you decide to pull the lever, the trolley will switch tracks, avoid the group of 5 people, but causing the death of the one single person on the other track.
So, and I've actually heard variations of this where in a similar situation, you know, if it were 3 kids versus a 80-year-old experienced person, right? You know, I've heard variations of this, and absolutely, this is a rabbit hole you can absolutely go down into the duality of decision makings and, you know, ascertaining one's own personal philosophies. It absolutely is. This is a very good intro.
Now think about it and leave your comments in the comment section below. Which one would you choose? Now, before I explain how Lelouch and Suzaku take part in this ethical dilemma, I will explain to you the second scenario. And for this scenario, we'll modify the situation just a little bit. So you're once again near a set of train tracks, and a trolley is speeding down the tracks. Ahead, there are 5 people tied up and unable to move on one track. There's no track this time, but you are standing on a bridge over the tracks next to a very large person. Now you are once again
feel like this is gonna go silly places.
And faced with a decision. You can either this time again do nothing, and the trolley will continue down its current path and hit the group of 5 people. Or this time, however, you can simply give the fat man a little bit of a push and he will tumble down to the tracks below. His large size would ultimately stop the trolley, save the 5 people, but he would die as a result of your action.
We could actually amend this to you have somebody that is operating a piece of machinery like a forklift or something like that, and you would push this person in the forklift down. It would lead to the same result.
Now, I will pose the exact same question again. Would you guys push this fat man? And let me know if your answer changes, because if it did, I want you to comment, what about it changed? See,
I have an inability to answer these because my brain, and this is, for those of you that understand L5R, I have Scorpion-isms, let's put it that way. I have to be 3 steps ahead at any point in time. I do, in fact, take a lot of inspiration from characters like Lelouch, not saying that I am Lelouch, not saying that he is the sole inspiration, but characters like Lelouch have inspired me to try and be 3 steps ahead at minimum. So in a situation like this, it's very hard for me to dial out all potential other variables, right? You know, it's very hard for me to answer these specifically, and it ends up being an hour-long conversation. So I will save you from that.
Why I bring up this analogy, because it's actually a lot similar to the scenario we have in Code Geass. In almost every scenario, Lelouch would always pull the lever and sacrifice the 1 person to save the 5. Whereas on the other hand, Suzaku would most likely do nothing most of the time. You see, Lelouch as the series protagonist embraces a pragmatic and utilitarian philosophy.
Yeah.
He believes that the ends justify the means and is willing to commit acts that may be perceived as evil in order to achieve his ultimate goal of overthrowing the Britannian Empire. and as a consequence, create a better world for his sister and those suffering under Britannian rule. Lelouch is
It really is one of those series that makes you think, because I've definitely had people come across, like, there's a lot of new people, right? New people to the channel, new people to the streams, and some of them are just like, wait, Kip, you've watched Code Geass, your thoughts on it? It does retain its spot as my favorite anime, and I've watched it for a number of years, almost got a decade and a half at this point, right? I remember 2007 watching this. Neither here nor there. It is one of those series that every time I go through, I find a new angle, I find a new line of logic, I find a new philosophy being presented by, any number of characters. And it is one of those watches that I feel if you go and turn your brain off, I don't think you could necessarily enjoy it. And absolutely, until Attack on Cornelia, I believe it was episode 8 of Code Geass, it doesn't pick up for a lot of people until that point. But at that point, your 2, 3, 5 episode rule has already been broken. So if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. It is one of those that there are almost an infinite lines of logic you can draw from it and characters within. It does tackle hardcore themes, the Japanese people being reduced to a mere number, 11s. Lelouch, you can see, especially in R2, right, when they're in the casino, Lelouch does take issue with this. He will stand up for people saying, "Oh, you're just an 11." He's clearly Japanese. Thank you. He doesn't have an issue with breaking that status quo. And there's a lot you can take from that. It deals with authoritarianism. It deals with poverty. It deals with oppression. It deals with colonization. It deals with the philosophy of evil. And will you remain just in the knowledge you will fail, or will you become a greater evil to smite the evil you previously dealt with? And at the end of the day, evil will still exist. How do you not necessarily how do you get from point A to point B, but in getting from point A to point B, what is your motives, your reasoning behind it? That is why I continue to go back.
Approach is characterized by calculated manipulation, strategic deceit, and a willingness to sacrifice innocent lives if he deems it is necessary for the greater good. On the other hand, Suzaku embodies a more idealistic and principled approach to justice. He firmly believes in reforming the Britannian system from within, working within the rules and protocols of the Britannian military.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't even have to explain it then. Thank you. Thank you for explaining everything that I just explained. I could have just watched the video. I'll take that W, chat.
Suzaku is driven by a strong sense of personal integrity and refuses to compromise his principles even in the face of great adversity. He upholds the belief that it is possible to effect change without resorting to any morally questionable tactics. So which one is correct? If I could answer this, I'd be the greatest philosopher of all time and probably win a Nobel Peace Prize.
Correct. This is an incredibly subjective answer. And more often than not, especially dealing with outside of an example situation, there are variables to consider. There are always variables to consider. If you were going to say, for example, in the trolley example, if you were going to have to choose a track, however, it is between, instead of one person, people and 5 people, you can save 5 80-year-old people or 1 child, right? You see how even slightly tweaking variables can potentially change the entire outcome of the situation. There are people that have commented on the Wake Island video that I ended up doing, the reaction to it, saying that, I don't understand a lot of the logic that went into that. And you're correct. As a civilian, I don't have the authority or the ability to understand and make decisions like that did include the lives of soldiers. I don't have the ability to do that. What I can say my perspective, a very opinionated perspective as a civilian, but ultimately I cannot make decisions that military top brass would have had to make. And it's incredibly important to understand that in situations like this, it is sometimes there really isn't even a good answer. In these examples, Steven, someone effectively just gets run over by that train. In every one of these examples, there is a loss in some capacity. And even then, you could even take it away from military top brass, right? I'm assuming, Army, military, Navy, I'm assuming you and your squad, you and your corps have had to make hard decisions. Maybe there wasn't a good answer for the situation, or you realize someone would get injured or potentially worse in the process. And these are always hard decisions to make that have seemingly an infinite number of factors involved with it. Sometimes there isn't a good answer. Sometimes there's a less bad answer. And at the very least, at the end of the day, I feel you should be able to justify your answer. If you choose to move the track to the 1 person. What is your justification? Why? Why is the most powerful question you could ever ask something? Or if you want to do the 5, what is your justification for it? Why? Why did you choose this? And this is truly the nature of philosophy, asking the why, to understand. That being said, we can ask all day, well, why is an apple red? Why is it red? Why is it in a tree? Okay, cool. We can philosophically ask these questions. Sometimes science just has the answer. Well, this is because of the germination of apple seeds. This is just how this works. This red because of this. Do you want more? There is a time and a place for philosophy is what I'm trying to say with that.
Unfortunately, I'm just your average homeless YouTuber. Each
Legend.
method has its own benefits and drawbacks. You see, the utilitarian philosophy that Lelouch embodies makes sense on a logical and practical standpoint. Why not just sacrifice the happiness of 1 person in order to maximize the benefit of 5 people? By making these sorts of decisions, Lelouch can and will ultimately just carry on to achieve his goals, and without any doubt in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah.
And after all, those of you who pulled the lever in the trolley problem would probably relate to Lelouch. He believes, and you probably believe, that 5 lives are simply more valuable than 1, and therefore you can sacrifice the 1 person in order to save the 5. Well, for those of you who actually decided not to pull the lever, there was probably something about it that was irking you. Something about that situation, either pulling to sacrifice the 1 person or pushing the fat man, just didn't feel right to you. And if you really break it down, the questions you might be asking yourself were, is it okay to overlook that 1 person? If I did decide to sacrifice that 1 person, how did I even quantify that happiness in the first place? And of course, well, do 2 wrongs kind of make a right? All of these questions probably just floated around your mind, which is why you kind of hesitated to pull that lever. Which brings me to Suzaku's approach of the entire thing. You see, throughout the show, Suzaku continuously emphasizes that he needs to change the Britannian system from within.
Yes, he is very much, I will utilize the system to change the system.
Joins the Knights of the Rounds in order to become the reform within the system. And by upholding his moral integrity, he believes that he can achieve the end result using the correct means. In this case, Suzaku really believes that there are inherently right and wrong things, and that it's really important to use the correct methods to achieve goals. And this really...
I think you could have both. There are, yes, most everything, I would argue, at least a bunch of things, are morally ambiguous. Well, what's the saying? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Or even then, Code Geass brings about the... a good deed forced upon others is no different than an evil act, right? If you're going to, what's the word I'm looking for? What's an example that I can utilize? If you are going to give a child in your life, if you're just going to give them $1,000, right? You may have the best intention that they're going to save that money, that, they're going to give it to their parents. They're going to tell them, hey, this person gave me this, obviously this child, right? It's like a daughter, son, niece, nephew, etc., right? You have good intentions there. However, it could also lead to a number of situations, a number of faults with the family. It could lead to them losing it. It could lead to them buying something that they shouldn't have bought and causing internal strife and stress within, and this is just a light everyday example of that. Intention has a lot to do with whether an action is inherently good or evil. That being said, there are actions that are absolutely evil. I think we can look for people, a certain cupcake individual that seems to have a predisposition for people under the age of 18 for YouTube TOS and guidelines, as well as YouTube cracking down on the mention of this individual's name in regards to harassment. Rev says Desu did retrieve a YouTube guideline strike violation for this. I will not be naming this individual. Just know that touching and dealing with certain individuals under a certain legal age is generally the wrong decision. And I think anyone can universally agree that this would be deemed an evil act. I think we can agree on that.
Really contrasts to Lelouch's ideal, where he only focuses on the outcome. And with Suzaku's approach, he really focuses on the process rather than the outcomes. However, the thing is, Suzaku's dedication to adhering strictly to principles might slow down the pace of change. In a society where people are continuously oppressed every day, this could allow ongoing oppression and suffering to persist,
Yes,
which
it will.
might potentially undermine the effectiveness of his approach.
Suzaku becoming an honorary Britannian in not showing any form of outspokenness or resentment or what's the word I'm looking for? Opposition to the way Britannia did things in Code Geass is him saying the system is okay as it is. Yes, you are doing this. I am aware of this. I am going to do my best to rework the system from within. But at the same time, the very same system that you're trying to work within to change is still causing the suffering of others. And it is unjust. That being said, on the flip side of it, Lelouch is outspoken. He is in stark opposition to it. He doesn't like this system, but he does resort to morally gray, if not evil acts. So it really is which one, what is right, what is wrong, or is it in the infinity of gray in between? It really is a good show for this. It's a very good media.
And the other crux of this entire philosophy is what Lelouch mentioned in his conversation. He said, what if that evil was so great that using just means cannot solve the problem? In other words, morals ultimately limit what kind of actions you take. And if this restraint is ultimately stopping you from achieving your end goals, then there is no point in being on a moral high ground if it's simply just effective overall. The greater evil paradox, as we've probably explored, is a pretty hard question to solve.
Yes.
However, what makes Code Geass so brilliant is that I think the ending presents us with a solution to this entire paradox.
Yeah.
If at the core
I'm
of
very curious because I've had, after years and years of just reflection, introspection, etc., I've come to my answer, and it is a third answer that lies in between. It lies in between: do you remain just, or do you yourself, become the greater evil to overcome it? My answer lies somewhere in the middle. I'm very curious what his answer is.
Of the greater evil paradox is that this greater evil will replace the first lesser evil. Then what the show is basically saying is that as long as the second evil, which is the greater evil, is gone, then there is no paradox. And Lelouch's ultimate sacrifice embodies the essence of the greater evil paradox. He's willing to take on the role of a villain and bear the weight of the world's hatred in order to create a better future. By willingly becoming the greater evil, he brings about the end of the original evil, the oppressive Britannian regime. He knows that the actions that led him up to this point are often morally ambiguous, involving manipulation, deceit, and sacrifice.
Yeah.
By letting the world focus their hate on himself, his self-imposed death not only erases the cycle of hatred caused by the greater evil paradox, but also is a form of redemption and atonement for his past choices. I think at the end of the day, this ending still raises the question of, can the pursuit of a better world ever be truly separated from acts that are considered evil?
It's a good answer. It does railroad you down the line from that situation, and it does revolve around your intent of whatever decision that you're making.
You reached the end of the video. If you liked, please drop me a like and subscribe to see more. I use your feedback to grow this channel, so if I know that you like this content, I'll keep making more. If not, I'll figure something out. But if you like this video, please check out my video on Oshinoko. But I'll keep the outro short, so peace.
No, this was good. I like this. I have always liked Code Geass, and it's very interesting that in the year 2023, we are still seeing more Code Geass content. And this was very interesting, and he does pose an interesting solution. My solution falls within the middle in regards to the evil paradox. At the end of the day, if it is I alone, there's not much I can do. What I can do is do what I do all along. To talk with people, to communicate with people, to work with people, to find a mutual solution for everybody. If it's just me and I act in, say if I have Thanos snap omnipresence, right, or omnipotent ability, right, and I could make any change, right? At the end of the day, while I have my own experiences and while I try to think in everyone's best interest, ultimately at the end of the day, I'm going to have blind spots. So yes, work with other people. Come together to find a mutual solution, to find a way where everyone can overcome these proverbial evils. And that's where my answer more aligns with. There's, yes, to me, it's more of a spectrum of answers rather than a binary, I will remain just or I shall become the greater evil. But that also has come with my own experiences, my own unfortunate events that I have gone through, and my own personal growth. Where do you fall on this? Where do you fall on the evil paradox? Which perspective do you agree with more? Do you think the answer is in that infinity of gray in between? What's your thoughts on Code Geass as a media? I'm very curious. Let me know in the comments section. Please keep it civil, and I will see you in the next one.